Morbius is finally here! And yeah, that happened. Spoilers. Now that the latest living vampire has made his way to the silver screen, so many questions have been opened up. Look, regardless of the smoothness of the whole situation, what happened in those post-credit scenes will have major impacts on not only the Sony-Verse, but the MCU going forward. Will the Vulture ever take his helmet off again? Is Martine a good or bad vampire? And when the next multiversal crisis happens, will it be Dr. Michael Morbius who saves everything? Probably not, but let's talk about it right now. Those post-credit scenes definitely left us with a lot of questions. But to start, an entire movie did happen before them. We leave Dr. Michael Morbius off in a very interesting place at the end of the film. He has just ended the life of his best friend who went extremely crazy very quickly. He almost seemed to jump at the opportunity to become a bloodthirsty monster, even if his life wasn't in danger. He got really great at dancing in the mirror and overall left Morbius with no other choice but to take him out. His girlfriend, Martine Bancroft, was also in a much different place emotionally speaking than she used to be. Apparently, drinking Morbius's blood just before he drains you of all of yours is the formula to turn others into vampires as well. Those red eyes opened wide, telling us there are definitely plans for Martine to return as well. Also, I guess Morbius is just sort of off the hook for killing those several mercenaries on a ship in international waters, since he's free to just drive around and meet random birdmen in abandoned fields. As silly as this was, the introduction of Michael Keaton's Vulture into this universe opens a world of possibility, especially for what he has planned. I'm not going to try and explain why the Vulture teleported here. I honestly don't know, and it doesn't make much sense. But let's start from, he's here, okay? Go.
Sorry, you left it out. You know I'm a curious person by nature.
Obviously, he would be released from prison, as in this universe, no one knows who he is or what crimes he may have committed in other universes. Apparently, he doesn't miss his family and is ready to go right back to a career of villainy, even if he calls it good. Obviously, the plan here is to form some kind of Sinister Six in the Sony universe. But just who could make up the lineup?
We'll see, I guess.
Clearly, this group is going to have to convince a few people that the work they are doing is actually good and not villainous. Michael Morbius, for example, is not an inherently bad person, and would likely not agree to be on a team with Sinister in the name. The first and most obvious addition beyond Morbius and Vulture is Venom. Again, not an inherently bad guy. However, he has been confirmed to live in the very same universe as Dr. Michael Morbius, based on references to the San Francisco incident in the film, and Morbius joking to a scared victim that he is Venom.
I am Venom.
Eddie Brock and Venom, who are actively looking to play a larger role in their community, looking for new superhero names like Lethal Protector, would eagerly be willing to join a super team with a doctor and a father from another dimension. Some other announced Sony Marvel projects could be guiding us right into who could round out this Sinister Six. Aaron Taylor Johnson will debut as Kraven the Hunter in his own solo film. Kraven is a longtime member of the team along with Vulture, so even though characters like Morbius would be relatively new, it would still have some old flair. There have also been rumors and confirmations in some cases of solo Black Cat, Madam Web, and Silver Sable projects. Any of these characters would make great additions, especially with some of their anti-hero leanings similar to Morbius and Venom. Given that Sony's other huge Marvel property, the Into the Spider-Verse animated film, was such a success to warrant a sequel, any of those villains could make their way to the Sony-Verse as well. Lastly, an outside shot but still a possibility. Given how many rules were just thrown out the window by bringing Vulture across the multiverse, the final member of the team could be another Spider-Man villain who originated in the MCU as well. It has long been rumored that Quentin Beck aka Mysterio could have faked his death in the MCU. His transport to the Sony-Verse would receive much less pomp and circumstance compared to Vulture. Therefore, whatever caused Michael Keaton to change universes could have done the same to Jake Gyllenhaal, making Mysterio an original Sinister Six member who could round out the team drafted by Sony. Regardless of the makeup, it's clear that the post-credit scenes of Morbius is setting up a Sinister Six. But that means they have to be getting ready to introduce a Spider-Man for the Six to go up against. But which one is an interesting question. There are a number of possibilities as to which Spider-Man could be introduced in the Sony Marvel universe, in order for the Sinister Six to actually have someone to go toe-to-toe with. The first and probably least desirable possibility is that some behind-the-scene curtain studio drama forces the MCU Spider-Man we know and love out of the MCU. They clearly don't need to use logic in order to get someone from the MCU to the Sony-Verse, and if Sony and Marvel decide they don't want to play nice anymore, then, as soon as the Multiverse of Madness, we could see Tom Holland make his way to Morbius's playground as well. Would I hate it and probably cry? Yeah, I would. The next possible option for a Spider-Man in this universe would also not make a whole lot of sense, but since when does Sony care about that?
I feel like that's on me.
There are rumors that say that Venom, Morbius, and future films could have been taking place in the Raimi universe all along.
I told you, I'll take care of it.
In the trailer for Morbius, Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker can be seen painted on the wall with the graffiti murderer written on top of him. Now, this is no longer canon, but it still could hint at what the Sony-Verse is going for here. Now, obviously there already existed a different version of Venom that attached itself to a different version of Eddie Brock. However, people have been clamoring for a continuation of all Spider-Man franchises at this point. To have the original take on Spider-Man's most famous villain team would be very poetic. But after pointing out all the inconsistencies, even I might give up if Sony tries to make this a thing. I don't think Tobey Maguire is their best option either. The next two options I actually think are incredibly feasible and could save the Sony Marvel universe. First of all, I actually think the best option would be to have this be the Amazing Spider-Man universe all along. Venom and Morbius both had their films take place in the same universe where Peter Parker, as played by Andrew Garfield, did his crime fighting. Now, it's possible that Venom could take place before the first Amazing Spider-Man, which would explain why Eddie Brock had never heard of him. However, assuming that Morbius takes place years into the future, while Andrew Garfield was going through his not pulling his punches phase, we could see these three films line up in a way that makes sense. Vulture gets sent back along with Andrew Garfield and begins to form the Sinister Six, fighting Spider-Man, who after meeting his other Spider-Men in another universe has a new outlook on life. This could definitely work, and it could see Andrew Garfield continue on as Peter Parker. Another incredible option would be to have the Spider-Man of this universe be someone we are familiar with, but a new character altogether. Kinda. I say bring Shameik Moore into live action, and make this another separate universe where Miles Morales is Spider-Man. He wouldn't even be the same Spider-Man from the Into the Spider-Verse film series, just another universe with Miles Morales. This way the continuity is much less tampered with, and we could see him get one up on the Vulture who thinks that Spider-Man is Peter Parker. Seeing a live-action Miles Morales take on the Sinister Six would be pretty incredible, and help legitimize what the Sony Marvel universe is going for. Now, this plan is all well and good. The Sony-Verse gets their own Sinister Six, and possibly a new Spider-Man to boot. But what's the point? Thanks to Spider-Man No Way Home, we know that these universes do not necessarily exist separate from each other in a multiversal context. And heck, when Multiverse of Madness comes out, we could see that the Fox X-Men and Fantastic Four could be in the same multiverse as well. Plus, who knows what else? Throw in Ben Affleck's Daredevil, the 1980s Howard the Duck, and maybe even Nick Cage's Ghost Rider. It's clear the future of the MCU is heading towards multiversal crossovers. This means that once the Sinister Six team forms and fights its Spider-Man, we will all just be waiting until they make their way back to the main Marvel Cinematic Universe. But what kind of events could cause them to get there? Sure, they could appear as soon as Multiverse of Madness, but that would require an impossible level of lack of planning. No, I think the Sony-Verse will exist by itself for a little while. It has some more villains to introduce and heroes for them to fight. But the MCU will likely not only have one issue with the multiverse. Sure, Doctor Strange and the Scarlet Witch may be taking the first deep dive into what the multiverse actually means, but we know of villains coming that could make their madness look like child's play. Kang the Conqueror has already been introduced, and from the comics he is an extremely threatening Avengers-level villain, who can and has accessed all corners of the multiverse. The fallout of Multiverse of Madness could see universes colliding, or at least doorways to other universes being permanently opened, allowing the Sony Sinister Six to enter the MCU anytime they please. Once Kang begins his conquering, however, we may need a team-up of Marvel heroes, villains, and anti-heroes that would put the portal scene in Avengers Endgame to shame. Another reason the Sinister Six could find their way to the MCU could be because some of its members are looking to get home. Regardless of the circumstances, they got Michael Keaton, and if my theory is correct, Jake Gyllenhaal to the Sony-Verse, and those villains may be looking to get back home. In doing so, Kraven and whoever else they decide to have on their team could steal materials necessary to build a way back to their universe. Lastly, the dream is to see another Spider-Man crossover movie, but you would have to go even bigger. Instead of the 3 Spider-Men fighting villains from 3 different universes, you could add even more. Imagine the Sinister Six, as described above, making their way to the MCU, maybe even after killing Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man in their universe. Just when Tom Holland is down and out, some more portals open up, and in walks the live-action Spider-Ham, voiced by John Mulaney, Spider-Man Noir, played by Nick Cage, Shameik Moore, Jake Johnson, and of course Tobey Maguire. This time it would be an army of Spider-Men fighting against the most famous team of villains. This could be awesome enough for us to forget about the ridiculous way that the Vulture entered the world of Morbius, just like Spider-Man No Way Home did. No matter what you thought of Morbius, it will have lasting effects on the MCU and the Sony-Verse. What role do you think Morbius will play in this vast multiverse in the adventures to come?